That's the great thing about being a writer. You don't need anybody else. Directors need writers, actors need writers. Everybody on the production team needs a writer. But writers only need themselves. So you can write and write and write and write to your heart's content. And that's what I did.
Hey, Common Sister, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Today, we have the pleasure of introducing you to one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Dennis Leoni. He is a creator, an executive producer, and an avid golfer. Let's not forget that. He is one of the best people in the business, great personality, and you're going to get to know him today. So without further ado, please help me welcome Dennis Leoni. Hey, Dennis. How are you?
Hi, Lydia. I'm well. How are you?
Good. You look great. I've been so excited about doing this interview with you. First of all, I want to know, where is it that you hail from?
I'm from Tucson, Arizona, and I grew up there and lived there for the first 22 years of my life. And then we left and we moved to Hawaii for a couple of years. But Tucson is my home, and I love Tucson. I love the food there. The Mexican food is the best in the world. And, I'd go back if it wasn't so damn hot. It's about 110 there today or something. I don't know what it is.
Wow.
But Debbie and I are now here by the beach, and it's pretty nice.
Oh, how fantastic. So you said you lived in Hawaii for a few years. What took you to Hawaii?
Well, Debbie always wanted to travel. So she got an interview with Pan Am, which was the old airline. And they didn't hire her, but they flew her to Hawaii for the interview. And then she liked Hawaii. We had been living together for a long time. And she loved Hawaii. And I said, "Is it nice there?" And she said, "Oh, it's beautiful." I said, "Okay, just stay there." And I was working in old Tucson. I was a stuntman. And I had calcium deposits on my hips. I was getting hurt. Ricky had dropped me on my head. My neck was hurting. My hips were hurting. And I said, "Just stay in Hawaii and I'll come." And I was working as an actor in those days. And so I had my headshots put in order and got new ones. And I moved to Hawaii, took all our stuff. We got a little apartment. And that was really where my career really took off.
Wow.
Because
So,
I got on Hawaii 5-0, and that's
okay, the original Hawaii 5-0.
the original one.
The original. Okay.
Yes.
So let me back up for those
dating
people
me
who
now.
for those people who don't know, who is Debbie?
Debbie's my wife. We've been together for last May. It was the 50th anniversary of our first date.
So now you and Debbie were in Hawaii. You started doing work on Hawaii 5-0.
Yes. I got hired as an extra, and then they asked me if I wanted to be a stand-in, and so I stand-ins, and it's union in Hawaii. So I was making, in 2 days, I was making almost what I made a week in Tucson, at old Tucson.
Wow.
And we were always going in overtime because Jack Lord was never on time. He was always late. He always came out of his trailer about 10 o'clock. We had 6 o'clock calls. He would come out late, and then we would go late. And so I made oodles of money. It was great. And then they asked me, Don Martin Nielsen, who was one of my dearest friends, he was the second AD, and he was overworked. So one day he came up to me, he goes, "I'm working too hard. Here's a radio. You are now a production assistant." So they bumped me, and I became a PA with a radio, and I handled all the things. I worked as a second, and when Don got sick, I became the second AD, and that's how I really became. And Don Martin always wanted me to be an AD, but I didn't. I became a writer instead.
Wow. So did you start writing in Hawaii?
I did. I wrote my first script. It's called Alejandro. It's a feature film. Actually, it's a 2-hour pilot for a series. It's a Western series about a Mexican boy who saves the life of Columbus Delano, who was the Secretary of Interior under Ulysses S. Grant. And it's a historical fiction, but it's about a Mexican boy.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty cool story.
So what
I don't show it to anybody because it's not very good.
How amazing. So then you started writing. You came to Los Angeles and started writing?
Yes, I had my first script and I gave it to my first agent was a woman named Francine Whitkin. I don't think she's still in the business. I don't think she's still alive. We tried to give it to everybody. We gave it to Robert Reed. He wanted to read it, and Paul Williams read it, and a bunch of people. And it just sort of launched me, and then I started writing a bunch of other shows like Lou Grant and MASH, and I wrote some pilots and different things, different series that were on the air at the time, and then some pilots that were at Columbia, because Debbie was working at Columbia, so I got all the pilots. It was pretty cool. And so then I just was writing all kinds of spec scripts. And I wrote about 11 of them before I finally got the job.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk about writing. What are 3 tips you could give young people out there that want to get into writing?
Well, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. I see so many people who come to me and they say, hey, I have a script and I want to do the script, and it's their passion project, and I get that. But you have to keep writing. You can't stop. People think that they can get away with 1 or 2 projects or even 3. I wrote a dozen before. I just kept writing and writing and writing and writing. And also, you can't be precious about your writing. You have to understand that there are people will buy things for certain reasons, and it has nothing to do with your passion necessarily or your voice. If you go work for somebody else, you have to be able to emulate their voice for their series, so that you can do their show, not your show, their show.
I'm going to stop you for 1 second. So when you're talking about knowing their voice, you're talking about when you're writing spec scripts?
Yes, because that's the way I came up in series television. And that's the best way, I think, to break in, to get into somebody else's show, because nowadays everybody wants to do their passion project and write their own show. And everybody thinks that, if it's great, they're going to make it. And they can sometimes, because there's a lot of outlets now, but staying on the air is a different deal. So you have to learn how to keep your show on the air, how to keep going. You can't just write, 2 shows and think, wow, here we are, because, hey, I had to write 53 of them for Resurrection. And then when I did Los Americans, I had to write 11. You have to just generate stories. And like I said, don't be precious, because writing is rewriting. You have to rewrite your things. Things don't come out the best the first time around. Maybe they do sometimes, but don't be precious. Always listen to other people. One of the things I think, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm smart enough to know that I don't know everything. And so when somebody that I respect and I know is smart and knows about story, like Debbie for one, she's always been my best editor. And we fight like hell about this. Because she does this, because she was a VP at ABC, she thinks she knows everything. but she is really good, and you have to listen to people and take the best of what they got. I had to learn that on Resurrection Boulevard because I had writers coming to me all the time with ideas, and it was hard for me to let go of my ideas and take their ideas. But like I say, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I was sharp enough to know that I know a good idea when I hear one and to put it in my script, because I'm going to get the credit anyway.
So let me. Yes.
Resurrection Boulevard is mine.
So let me ask you about writing on other people's shows. So you would get on, let's say, Lou Grant, or you got on another TV show. What did you have to learn? You mentioned you have to learn the people's voices. What else, as a young writer coming onto somebody else's writer's room, what else do you have to learn?
Well, I mean, Gil Grant was really my mentor. I did 3 shows with Gil, and he taught me that 75% of being on the staff is being able to get along with everyone, and the other 25 is the talent. Because if you can't get along with people, they'll fire you. It's that simple. And you have to, so it's about emulating the voice of the showrunner. It's about being able to get along and work with other people. And, because I had lots of bosses, I didn't step in and be an EP. I stepped in and I was a freelance writer. I wrote my first script, Whole High, for NBC. And that was a Gil Grant show. And he hired me, but I was just a freelance. I wasn't even on the staff. And like an arrogant little guy that I was, I gave some notes to one of the writers, and next thing you know, they're angry with me because, who am I to come in from the outside and start telling staff writers what to do?
Do you remember those notes? Do you remember the notes you gave?
I don't remember them. I know that I proved to Gil that I could do this when he took me into the editing room, and we were looking at one of my episodes, and I gave him a note, and I can remember it, but it's too long a story. And he agreed with me. He said, absolutely, you're right. So he knew that I could get this. And actually, going back to Hawaii Five-0, in the old days, they used to have boards. They didn't have computers. They had boards with little strips, and each strip represented a scene. And they put a whole board together with all the strips. And Scott Maitland, who was the first AD on Hawaii Five-0, one day said, let's let Dennis try to get a shot at the board. So they let me take the board home for an episode, and I put the board in with day for night, night for day, all the scenes that belong together, and we shot 7-day episodes. And I took it back, and Scotty and Don Martin asked Scotty, said, well, Dennis did this board, what are we going to do? And Scott said, we're going to use it. He did a fantastic job. So I knew that I could do this, and that's where I got my confidence. And so I could be an AD. I learned that I could be anything that I wanted, because then I started writing, because writing is where the control is, especially in series television. Because in series television, writers are king and directors are guests. They just come on as guests, like guest stars, and they do an episode, 2 episodes, 7 episodes, who knows? But they are at the mercy of the showrunner, because I recut all the directors, and some of them loved it, maybe some of them didn't. I had my issues sometimes with Jesus. I love Jesus Torino, but sometimes I didn't agree with him, and it was my show, and I was going to do what I wanted to do.
So Dennis, you were talking about Spec Scripts. What exactly is a Spec Script?
a spec script is a sample of your writing, whether it is part of one of the shows that you want to write, or maybe it's a really good script of another hit show that's on the air that shows a sensibility that you can match to the show that you want to write for. Like if it's a mystery, or it's a horror show, or it's a love romantic comedy, or whatever it is. I wrote, like I said, Lou Grant, MASH, and Roseanne. I wrote a bunch of scripts. I can't even remember all the scripts I've written. I think I sent you a thing of, and you've only got the ones that have been produced.
Right.
Not all the ones that are samples of other shows. I remember Linda Bloodworth, who is an Emmy-nominated writer for MASH. She read my MASH and she thought it was, camera ready.
And she went on to do Designing Women, right? That was her
she
big
did Designing
show,
Women.
yes.
She was wonderful. I loved her. She helped me so much. She was at Columbia in those days, and that's how I met her. And then I met Ike Jones, who gave me my first job. And he was a producer there at Columbia with Lonnie Elder. I don't know if you know Lonnie
Yes,
Elder.
I know Lonnie Elder, yes.
But I met all these people, amazing people. And Ike introduced me to it's a funny story. I'll tell you really quickly. He used to take me to the horse races, and we'd go to the horse races, and he loved the horses. So one day I'm sitting in a box, and there's a guy next to us, and he's bet on the horses, and he's talking to me, and Ike says, yeah, I want you to meet Julie. He's a writer too. Talk to him. So I'm talking to this guy named Julie, and he's a lovely older gentleman, and he's telling me all these things about, yeah, you should write this and do this and do that. And I go, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm just a beginning writer, and I'm doing the best. All these things. Anyway, later on, I'm talking to Ike, and Ike goes, you know who that is, right? And I go, no. And he goes, that's the guy who wrote Casablanca.
Wow.
I was talking to Julius Epstein.
Wow.
And he was giving me advice on how to be a writer. So, and then later on, he had me talk to Carl Foreman, who wrote the original High Noon and Guns of Navarone. And I mean, it's been a pretty amazing career.
So
I'm very fortunate.
What was one takeaway you got from Julie?
Well, he just encouraged me to keep writing and keep writing. Don't stop. That's a great thing about being a writer. You don't need anybody else. Directors need writers, actors need writers. Everybody on the production team needs a writer. But writers only need themselves. So you can write and write and write and write to your heart's content. And that's what I did.